This is Dr. Chichi, and this is the Dr. Chichi show. And in this show, we have blessed lives, and we have actually interviewed people that have so many amazing stories to share with us. And today is no different. I'm gonna have you please introduce yourself and tell the audience what you do.
Wonderful. Dr. Chichi, thank you for having me here.
Absolutely.
I am Terence D. I like to say I'm an organizational psychologist, but a community servant. If I talked about all the different jobs that I've had, the list would just be too long for the time we have available.
Absolutely. It's an honor to have you here for many reasons, but we're just going to start off by talking about May being the month of awareness for mental health. Can you educate us, educate the public on what we should know about mental health?
Wow. That's a big order. This is a Mental Health Appreciation Month. I think we had talked earlier about depression and how depression itself is basically coming from, we know root cause of it is from sin, of course, and I want to qualify creation, fall, and redemption. But the simple fact that we lose so much and we're in pursuit of what we call happiness and holiness, but it can't be facilitated until we understand what is going on around us and be able to see that we're living in a level of success and be satisfied with that and be willing to work on the areas in which brings us what we call contentment. You know, when you're thinking that you're always lack of what you need or lack of, that creates a vacuum in who you are as a person.
I agree so much with you on that. And also, culturally and what the standards that the society sets can also put its own pressure on people. And before you know it, they fall into categories that things like depression and, you know, where they actually need medical care. Can you shed some light on that? Because that's something that is a big topic this month. And also substance abuse and just the things that go along with those key words.
I think one thing that's so interesting is when you talk about it. I was in a group with young men a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned that 800 abortions occur each day to babies of color. And one of the gentlemen sitting in the room, he said, "I'm depressed." And I've always been depressed because I participated in that behavior. Well, deep within himself, he knew that he had an obligation to be a father, to be a caretaker, to provide security, to build a nurturing relationship, to provide food for his family, to be a component of success within his community. And he felt that he wasn't connected along those areas. So because he participated in an abortion, he knew that he took part in killing a life, and he took responsibility for it. But the depression associated with being the murder aspect of that had him in a constant level of depression. And so when I talk about that, it's important for us to understand our purpose. Yes. You had a guest on a few minutes ago, he talked about prayer. One of the things that prayer does, or spiritual development does, it gives us a sense of connected to something greater than ourselves. And when we don't feel connected to something greater than ourselves, the deficiencies in us continues to exist. And when they remain untreated, we find that we have depression. You know, you see that. You can go to bed, and even though you're sleeping, your mind is still thinking about the things that you feel are inadequate, which causes a state of depression even when you sleep. Consciously and unconsciously, these things are occurring, just like stress. Stress is occurring whether or not you acknowledge it, it's there. You know, and that is caused simply, as we know, creation, fall, and redemption is from the fall of man, sin itself. You know, you can try to do a medical intervention with depression, but when you look at it, there's 8 dimensions of wellness, which Samsha points out. each one of those need to be worked on constantly because you can never get to a point of homeostasis that you can maintain.
Yes.
It's up and it's down. The melancholy talks about that. And it fits different names of depression,
Yes.
but it all runs down to there's a hurt or there's a sorrow that resonates in my soul.
Absolutely.
And there's no measurement of spiritually dimensions of where that soul is. It encompasses mind, body, and soul. All of those areas need to be connected together.
Okay, you're saying a lot of deep things here, so I want to kind of see if we can break them up a little bit.
Sure.
Just so people can get this. Sometimes the depression and some of the things that people find themselves dealing with in mental health come from things or events that have happened in their lives, their environment, just what they went through even when they were younger.
Exactly.
Just manifesting and just haven't been dealt with. But also there are some, you talked about 8 dimensions. Can you mention them?
The 8 dimensions? Yeah.
Where there should be balance for, for us to see ourselves as.
Those 8 dimensions,
Yes.
one of them is finances,
Okay.
occupation,
Okay.
you have environment, also your intellect, your social connections, and I'll run down as I go through them. That was 7 or 8 or so, but it's the 8 dimensions of wellness.
Absolutely.
And all those components have to be addressed.
Right.
And say for instance, I'll give you an example. I'm one who cares for life dearly. So I have to make sure that I'm in an environment or a work environment that's going to allow me to facilitate my purpose.
Right.
You see, I couldn't be working in a liquor store where I know all of the suffering associated with alcohol. Another one is diet. Okay, diet is very important because we live in a very toxic environment. And if you're eating too much sugar, I work with kids with ADHD, they have to have some type of way to make sure that their diet is balanced. And that's another one of the dimensions of wellness.
Exactly.
There was a study by Ohio State a few months ago that if the father exercises, the whole family exercises. Okay, another component of wellness is socialization. 99% of issues associated with anger, particularly in our communities, is associated whether or not there's a healthy relationship with the father. There's a reason why. You see in the biblical text it says, the Father which art in heaven starts the prayer out. There's a need for the relationship and have the right balance in social relationship that's going to determine your mood and whether or not you're going to be depressed.
Absolutely.
So you see all of those dimensions have to be worked on because of the deteriorations of one existence because of the fall,
Absolutely.
which is called sin.
Absolutely.
Okay, and so now you see that soul, once the soul is connected, the volition, which is the will, the relationship component, the rationalness, the emotion, that's another component of will, and the body begins to succinctly work together.
Absolutely.
Because that spiritual component, that's another component of wellness, has to be addressed. Okay.
I really thank you for bringing this up because everybody can self-evaluate and see, because sometimes people ignore or put down some aspects and think they don't need them. Like,
Right.
I don't need social skills, I don't need the spiritual side. No, all of those components give the balance so that you can see life as a new opportunity, as a new way, because that's one thing I'm going to ask you about too. How people see life and how that can change how they perceive themselves. But before I go to that question, can you touch on some other aspects of mental health? I know it's not just depression. There are some other
There are
diseases
quite a
that
few.
probably need to be treated and things.
Well, you asked me about schizoaffective disorder, which is also a disorder, bipolar disorder. Most of those disorders, a person can get disability because they become incapacitated. But it's interesting. I had one of my friends or patients the other day called me, and he was telling me he was going through an episode of racing and high anxiety, unable to focus, always on the move, going through one of what we call the cycling events. And he said he was trying to get in touch with me. And what he needed the most was to be able to talk to someone. And so now you see the importance of being able to have connections and a network. I always say your net worth is always going to be determined by your network. And so you have to talk to people. You have to have good social relationships. You have to be honest and be able to talk about the real issues that in most cases, because of shame, we don't want to let other people know. But if you really look at it, we're all suffering. I don't believe there's no one existing that doesn't have one or multiple mental health issues. And you talk about addictions. You're addicted to pleasure, you're addicted to sugar, you're addicted to chicken wings, you're addicted to the NFL, you're addicted to exercise. You become attached to anything that you like. And that creates depression when you can't do what you think or you perceive that you like.
Absolutely.
You know, we want what we want when we want it.
Absolutely.
And so you see a society, particularly in America, where they tell you in the Constitution, you're in pursuit of happiness. What is that? That will make you leave your family 18 hours a day and work a job. And your family needs you so much to be connected as the father, because we were talking about men earlier, of being the role of showing love, and the way you show love is spending time, and deep within you, you desire that. But because you haven't been taught how to facilitate that, you isolate out, which impacts your whole ability of how you see yourself.
Absolutely.
You learn to mask the truth of who you are.
Absolutely, absolutely. Deep things, a lot of deep things you're saying here. And I want you to touch a little bit on substance abuse. I don't think this conversation will be complete without mentioning what that is and maybe how that can be dealt with a little bit. Then you also go into talking about what kinds of solutions, like, you know, just one thing I mentioned was how people perceive life, but you can also talk about how they can best manage their circumstances. Because they are in some countries, actually, what in one country might seem like this is what is expected, or someone of a certain age. In some countries, they may not even attain some of those levels of wealth, or if it's a career that you're pursuing. You know, so it's how you perceive yourself, part of getting help, in terms of just knowing that as long as you are alive, maybe there may be hope,
Right.
where others may not even have some of what you are stressing about within you.
I think you answered your question very well when you mentioned hope. What a society in America has become, we're 5% of the world population, but we use 60% of the pharmaceuticals. Nobody wants to deal with pain, which is systemic, it's in us, it's with us, it'll always be there. And so you have to have a mindset that there's alternative ways of dealing with pain other than medication. But we've been indoctrinated, when you're a baby, take a baby aspirin. I mean, the whole process of birth entails, and creation entails, pain. You know, the fertilization of the egg, there is pain in that process. And so we have not been able to train and develop coping skills to deal with pain, because instead of dealing with it and working through it, what do we want to do? We want to be able to remove it or suppress it, but it keeps popping back up. So it's interesting, I had a conversation with a neuropsychologist traveling from San Francisco, and I asked him about PTSD. He said, well, what we're finding in the military is that it's not that the experience on the battlefield is so traumatic, which they do occur, but the individuals that are being impacted by PTSD the most lack the coping skills before they got the battlefield experience. So they didn't have the coping skills at home. They didn't know that you pray. They didn't know you read your sacred text. They don't know that you had to talk with your family. They don't know that you have to live out service and relationships that are important to you, and that they didn't know how to live because they didn't know how to cope with the trauma or the experience that occurred on the battlefield. Absolutely. So when you say a family that prays together, stays together, encourages one another, dialogue about what the suffering is, and want to come alongside and understand that they need to care for one another as the purpose of why they're there, that helps individual builds the coping skills to be able to deal with the reality of suffering.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
you have said a lot.
Yes.
The coping mechanism involves relationships and society and community. And I know you work more with men.
Men, right.
But I know you also do so many other things in the community. Can you talk a little bit about that, just so people can know?
Well, I do a couple of things. I work with kids in the court system who has committed crimes. And I can honestly say, 99% of their mental health issues are connected to their relationship with their father, and the girls also. I just left a clinic, and all my patients didn't have a relationship with their fathers, and there's all kinds of mental health issues. that drove them to use. Because when someone offers you something to make you feel better, you're not going to analyze what's in it. The only thing you hear is it's going to make me feel better.
Yes.
And so without the ability to transfer what we call subjective thinking, which means how you feel, and become objective, which means what is going to be the facts of what I'm doing.
Yes.
Because most of us don't like to deal with the facts of our existence, so we continue to try to base our feelings on the fact of who we are. Absolutely. And what's going on with us.
Yes.
And that we're falling, and that we need to help, and we need to have support, and we have to change our behavior in order to have all those relationship needs met, but also be able to deal with the suffering that is part of life.
That is real.
Right.
Absolutely.
And money will not buy that.
No.
Things will
it
not
never
buy
does.
that.
Never fills the gap. Now we are actually collaborating in June to host a Father's Day event,
Okay.
which is called Men with a Purpose. I think that title is just about drawing men, but also empowering men, letting them know they have a role to play and they need to know that they are appreciated. And so we are working on that together. So can you tell the audience a little bit about that event and the date?
You said a lot. You said a lot when you said purpose. I think the research is showing that almost 90%, about 65 to 80% of people don't know their purpose. And so they're in a quagmire or a maze of life.
Yes.
And so this event coming up is for men to really take a look at and really understand what their purpose is.
Yes.
I always use the text, Malachi 6, where it says a man is to do justice and be kind and walk in humility. That's the purpose. So that means you have to serve your community. You have to have relationships with younger men and older men. You have to be a relationship with your wife. You have to have a healthy relationship with your children. You have to be balanced in the time you spend at your job. You have to be able to plan. You have to create opportunities within your sphere group or whoever you have influence on. And all of those things allow you to experience what you're purposely placed here for.
Absolutely.
You don't just here to look for your own self-grandization, but service.
Absolutely.
To
Giving
those
back to the
service,
community
giving back.
always gives the joy that
Rebuilding.
can never be taken away. So it's going to be a $15 ticket for that event because we want to serve. Dinner is actually on Saturday, June the 29th from 4 to 8 p.m. It's open to women too, but we want more men. We want male vendors. We're looking forward to you being able to go to Eventbrite and purchase, or you can reach me or Cash App 240-413-9481. And can you please tell them also how they can reach you for anybody who wants to get in touch with you for any of the things you've spoken about today?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Once again, thank you so much, Dr. Chichi.
Absolutely.
You can reach me at Csgdcommunity@gmail.com, and that's Terence D. Collins.
Okay. And this event we are talking about is going to be at the Peacock House. So look forward to more things. I just love people who have a heart of giving back to their community, and that's one of the first things that really struck me the first day that I met you and spoke with you. So thank you for all you are doing. It doesn't seem like a lot when you look at one life at a time being transformed, but you are changing one community at a time by doing what you do with the love that God has put in your heart for people. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And if I just say, eyes have not seen,
yes,
and ears have not heard,
yes,
all of the things that God has prepared
absolutely
for those who love Him.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a great way to end this. Thank you for being here again.